Hello, and welcome to And the Runner-Up Is. This week on the show, we'll travel back in time to the 53rd Academy Awards, which awarded the films of 1980. 4 years after earning his first Oscar attention for Taxi Driver, Martin Scorsese came out with what would be known as one of his very best films, if not the best, Raging Bull. The intense drama earned him huge respect with critics, even if some audiences weren't quite ready for it at the time. The film went on to earn 8 Oscar nominations and won 2, most notably for Robert De Niro's iconic performance in Best Actor. But the film lost Best Picture to an equally powerful yet decidedly more understated drama, Ordinary People. So why did Raging Bull fail to hit big at the Oscars despite its stellar reputation in the years to come? We'll explore all this and more as we discuss how the Oscar almost went to Raging Bull. Hello, and welcome back to And the Runner-Up Is. I am your host, Kevin Jacobson, and today I have another fantastic returning guest, another Gold Derby colleague of mine. Back, you last heard her on Saving Private Ryan back in 1998, and here she is in 1980. We have Joyce Eng.
I just love all the controversial years.
Yes, you live for the drama.
Yes, I do. You know me so well.
Yes. And here we are. We're going to talk about yet another Martin Scorsese film. This is the 4th film that I'm talking about in this podcast for him being the runner-up. And that film, of course, is Raging Bull. Really the one that started it all, of people feeling like he was robbed. So let's get into a quick summary of Raging Bull. It is a psychological boxing drama based on the life of Jake LaMotta, who was an Italian-American middleweight boxer in the 1940s. And so the film kind of explores Jake's world as his brother slash manager, Joey, books him with boxing matches. And meanwhile, we see how Jake has this very explosive and violent temper and relationship with his wife. Eventually, he falls in love with a 15-year-old girl named Vicky, and he breaks things off with his wife to marry her. The rest of the film kind of shows like the parallels between Jake's professional life as a rising star in the boxing scene and his violent paranoia and ugly behavior that kind of threatens and alienates everyone around him, especially his wife and his brother. So the film was directed by Martin Scorsese and written by Paul Schrader and Martin, adapting the book Raging Bull, My Story by Jake LaMotta, Joseph Carter, and Peter Savage. So Robert De Niro stars as Jake LaMotta, Joe Pesci as his brother Joey, Kathy Moriarty as his wife Vicky, Nicholas Colasanto, Teresa Saldana, Frank Vincent, and Johnny Barnes. Raging Bull made $23 million at the box office. It was nominated for 8 Academy Awards, winning 2, but not Best Picture. So, Joyce, let's talk Raging Bull.
Okay. Well, I was not alive in 1980. So I didn't see this until I was like a teenager. And I have only seen this twice, counting yesterday when I rewatched this.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. I feel like I admire it more than I love it, and I've just never had the urge to revisit it. Even if I've been channel surfing and seen it on TV, I've never been like, let me just catch the last hour of this. But it's still an extraordinarily well-made film. The craftsmanship is really well done. I really think the star of the film is its editing, and that was one of the Oscars it won for Thelma Schumacher. But yeah, I still don't feel like I love it. Do you feel that way, or?
Well, it's one of those movies that growing up and wanting to get into film appreciation is one of those that everyone's like, you got to watch Raging Bull. It's the classic,
Yeah.
especially of Scorsese's. And initially, I did kind of feel like I respect this more than I love this. It's really very technically flawless and innovative in many ways with the
Yeah.
sound, especially all the sounds and the editing and the way the cinematography uses the black and whites with the shadows and how it does the different kinds of focus and stuff like that. I really found a great appreciation of that. Plus, of course, Robert De Niro's incredible performance. But yes, at the same time, I did feel like this is just like so unrelenting and unpleasant
Hmm.
to watch for most of it that it's definitely not one, I agree, that is necessarily one that I would want to just check out and just be like, oh, Raging Bull is on. Let's watch that for an
Yeah,
afternoon.
it like literally pounds you into submission. So,
Right, right. And we'll certainly get into like probably why that aspect of it didn't translate as well for the Oscars. But I have to say, having watched it again this week, that I did find a newfound appreciation of it. Again, more on an intellectual level than I warmly love this movie level. But still, I just have to acknowledge all of its fantastic themes. Like, it's basically toxic masculinity, the movie,
mhm.
you know? And I think
A very
for
popular Scorsese theme. So,
yes, very true, very true. And it also kind of has some of the same problems that people talked about with Goodfellas and The Wolf of Wall Street, people who didn't necessarily love those films, where people say maybe he's going too overboard, maybe he's reveling too much in the violence and all that sort of thing. But at the same time, it really does capture a really compelling portrait of this man, just completely unrelenting, warts and all. So I have to appreciate on that level.
yeah, I mean, it's just really a character piece
Mm,
on LaMotta, and it just so happens that he is this despicable person. So I think that's part of it too, like why it's so hard to connect to it, because
mm,
no one really likes watching, just flat out villains. And he's not really a villain, but he's the protagonist, and there's, for a long time there's nothing redeemable about him, and I think that's what a lot of people also look for in movies. Like by the end, there's some redeemable quality, and it doesn't really end that way with him. And it also makes you wonder, like, he, approved of the movie, though he was like part of the production and everything. And it's like he knew he was being portrayed like this, so, and he was
yeah,
fine with it,
I
because
know.
this is just who he is.
Yeah. I mean, he did admit kind of upon seeing it that it's like that movie kind of made me in a bad light, but he still kind of heaped praise on it, of course, but he was still just like, "Oh boy." Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, but I think we should definitely talk about the Robert De Niro performance. I'd say it's a pretty legendary performance, probably very influential for a whole generation of actors in terms of being totally method, like the Christian Bales and the Jared Leto's, all from all walks. I think were probably very influenced by what Christian Bale does in this film, not only
You mean
physically
Robert De
too.
Niro?
Yeah, sorry.
What Christian
Physic-
Bale does in Vice.
right. It's very similar. But as far as fluctuating the weight and also just getting so deeply entrenched in a character psychologically.
Yeah, and like he had been shepherding the project for years. Like he had to convince Scorsese to do it, and Scorsese finally did it when he was, like hospitalized from a cocaine addiction. Uh, yeah, it's just kind of like one of the first, if not the first, performances you think of when you think of like method acting and just like going to extremes. And that's, now like what everyone like talks about when you just, want to do like an Oscar bait film. But this wasn't really the case back then. Like there weren't a lot of actors or performances of this caliber where like actors just went to such great lengths to portray someone. And yeah, they had to stop production for like 4 months or something so he could gain those 60 pounds
Yeah.
for the future sequences when he's like down and out and, in the comedy club working on his routine. So yeah, like, it's impressive, but it's also like you could just put on a fat suit.
Yeah, and I admit, like watching it, I was like, is there some trickery there as far as is Robert De Niro actually that big?
Yeah. And it's like obviously you understand him having to get in shape to become a boxer for that. Like that's, that makes sense. But I don't think he really needed to put on those 60 pounds.
Well, there
I
you
mean,
have
but
it.
then again, like Christian Bale, like every 2 years,
Exactly.
he's just losing weight and putting on weight.
Yes, which I just want to say again, I'm very worried about him. Just saying,
I'm just
because that
worried
could
because he
not be
said like
healthy.
after American Hustle, he was never doing it again, and then he did it again.
And then here we are.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, we'll see if the same sort of result happens at this year's Oscars. But speaking of this year's Oscars, we also have Paul Schrader writing the screenplay with Martin. But this is one of the more famous cases of people being like, oh, wow, Paul Schrader doesn't have an Oscar. He wasn't nominated for, Taxi Driver, and he wasn't nominated for this. So let's
And
just
now
talk
he'll
about,
get it for a first reform. So
yes, another kind of a little bit of an unrelenting film of its own, for different reasons, I suppose. But let's talk about actually the story itself beyond all the technical craft work there is. Did you find this to be a strength of the film?
I did not. I
Okay.
I think it's the weakest part of the film. I kind of think it's like narratively flawed. It's a very simple story, and there's nothing wrong with simple stories, but it's just I think it's because it focuses so much on Jake, and there's just not enough around him, and like the other characters aren't built up enough for it to be sustainable. It's just you just kind of understand a story very quickly, and it just kind of goes through the same motions. It's like he's fighting again, and then he wins a couple bouts, and then he loses, and then it's his downfall, and it's just it feels kind of repetitive. And I know this was his life story, but I think there's not much of it that stays with you compared to the actual Best Picture winner.
Yes, fair enough. Yeah, if there was one big flaw I would have with the film, I mean, it's so ironic that people always say, like, oh, he didn't even get nominated for Raging Bull, where I'm like,
This
well,
this
you
script is
know,
not that great.
yeah, when you actually like sit down and look at it, take it in, I feel like all the other aspects of Raging Bull absolutely deserve those kinds of nominations. But I mean, fine, if you want a nomination, sure, but definitely not a win.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I do kind of agree that it is rather repetitive and redundant at times with the themes that are explored with the violence over and over between his professional and his personal life,
Yeah, and it doesn't really like say anything beyond that.
or different,
Yeah.
each
It's
time.
just like this is happening.
Again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, did you have a preference as far as like how the film explored the boxing scenes, the very violent, bloody boxing scenes compared to the personal life?
Uh I I think they were better in I mean, the story is just like whether he won or lost in the boxing scenes.
True.
But they like they were well shot, and like he was definitely inventive in the way he shot those sequences. Like I love the way that he changed the size of the ring depending
Mm,
on the results of that bout. It was big when he won, just kind of like representing, like a bright future for him. And then, it's just very close up tight shots
right.
when he was
Constricted.
losing.
Yeah.
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 And obviously, the famous shot of like the blood on the rope, and
Mm,
the his last match with Sugar Ray when he's just destroying his face.
yeah.
And just all the slow mo and fast mo that he did with it. It's a very show offy type of filmmaking, and I don't know if like on the one hand you can just be very awed by it, but on the other hand you could just be like you're just showing off right now. It's like stop it. But
Yeah.
I really liked it. Like I liked the way he shot it because it was groundbreaking in that sense. And the domestic scenes, I just really don't think there was much there. It's just like he is an asshole to everyone in his life. And like another thing with Scorsese's films is like they're very, male centered. Like his only female led film is Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore. So it's just, and I understand this is a story about Jake LaMotta. So Vicky is a supporting character, but like the woman in his life, you don't really understand how they're feeling, or why they stay with him, and just you don't really get a sense of their own feelings or motives. But I think the same can be said about Joey too. It's all the Jake show.
Yeah, that's fair. And I do actually I appreciate it when the film does, give some hints that there are other characters who have feelings of their own. Like
Mm-hmm.
when, like, I feel like despite Joey slash Joe Pesci being very much a supporting character, I do feel like we do get a pretty well fleshed out character with him.
Yeah, he's probably the second most,
Yeah,
but it's still
yeah,
not a lot.
right. But I really love actually Joe Pesci's performance in this, and I didn't necessarily remember loving it as much, but he gives a lot of life and a bit more of a levity to him, and that's just part of Joe Pesci himself. That's just kind of his manic energy that he brings to the table. But I think it's good to have that counterbalance of someone being like clearly turned off by this behavior, but also kind of loving his brother and relying on him to get money through boxing and all that. It's a complicated relationship, but I wish it was explored even further.
Yeah, it just kind of seems like after, their big spat, and then it like by the end, it's so, I don't think they just spend enough time on it, even though the movie is over 2 hours long. But maybe
Right.
could have like a fight scene or like a yelling scene here or there.
Yeah, we could have done a montage of some fights maybe thrown in there. But Kathy Moriarty this is her first role, I believe. She was kind of discovered when she was very young. What do you make of her nominated performance here?
I thought she was good. She like, I mean, first of all, just a stunning screen presence.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, and it just always makes me laugh because she's supposed to be 15, and I always just think when I watch like old movies, I'm like 15-year-olds in like 1941, man. Like, but I thought she was really good with what material she had to work with,
Yeah, because there's not a lot, to
Yeah.
be fair. But for what we do get, I think we get some sense that she is smart, perceptive of how Jake is treating her. She's not like a total dummy, She's not
Yeah,
totally
she
blinded.
tries to like hold her ground as much
Right.
as she can, but she can't because he's a freaking boxer.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's a good performance, and I just feel like I wish we could spend a little bit more time with her.
Yeah, definitely would have appreciated more exploration of why she stuck with him for so long.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I do think that the best parts of the film are when the film explores kind of the whole Madonna whore concept.
Oh God.
You know?
But it's also just like that took up so much of the last half of the movie, and I'm just like, okay, you just need to like move on, or just like address this yourself. Because
Yeah.
I just felt like every other conversation was just like, are you cheating on me? Did you sleep with him? And I understand like that's just part of like, his insecurity and his complex, and that's just part of who he is. And he can't find that emotional release for it besides just punching people. But yeah, I felt like that needed more of like not an ending, but just like more of like a resolution to it, and instead of just constantly going about it, because I felt like there were so many just similar conversations, whether they were just cursing at each
That's
other
true.
or just him constantly berating her, asking if she's cheating on him.
Yeah, that is fair. But I just did appreciate some of the more subtler aspects of him kind of hanging on to a phrase or a sentence or a word that someone says, and then him just like becoming this awful, because like this is the type of person I hate in real life.
Yeah.
So I was really like relating to everyone else in this situation, being like, oh my God, you can tell that this person is so awful and impossible to be
And
with.
it's just like, dude, like let it go. Like,
yes,
we
exactly.
need to move on.
Please.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's a frustrating thing to have to constantly see all of these situations where he is just so impossible to deal with that
Mhm.
you can understand why an audience member could be like, "Oh my god, this is so like frustrating," you know.
Yeah, and like he does have like I guess the at the end when he's in jail and he's just punching the wall. Like that's a good scene for him, but it's also just I don't know, like I feel like a lot of times in movies you want to like sympathize or like empathize with the character, and I don't know if you really do that with him, you
Yeah.
know.
I
It's
never really
he's
did, to
just
be
a hard
honest.
person. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even with that scene of him like, why did I do that? And just keeps punching the wall for like a minute straight. And it's like I don't know if I do pity you. I don't think you always have to pity the protagonist or anything, but yeah, that's I mean it's a beautiful scene and I love the light in that shot too. Like the black and
Yes.
white photography and the whole film is amazing.
Mhm. Yeah, that's a scene that really is kind of affecting just in terms of how visceral and raw it is, but at the same time, I just never really felt like total sympathy for him in really any way because I did find him mostly irredeemable. So,
Mhm.
even in those moments where he kind of realizes that he screwed up, it's just like, well, you had it coming.
Yeah.
you know. But what do you think of like the all the flash forwarding into the where he's at the clubs doing his little comedy routines?
I didn't mind it. I feel like it just kind of had to end like that because it is about just, his quick rise and then his downfall that just doesn't stop. And like, that is like how he ended up, and it's
Yeah.
it's kind of it's sad and pathetic. And again, I feel like you're supposed to feel like sympathy for him too, but it's just kind of like you brought this on yourself as well.
Right, exactly.
But it is like I think like those scenes are kind of also very affecting too, especially when he's just like practicing like the on the waterfront monologue at the end. So I thought they're well done and they weren't like over the top in any way, I didn't think.
Yeah, I think the ending scenes especially were very well captured, especially when he is in front of the mirror just going over things over and over. Kind of get a sense of but like how pathetic he kind of has become or maybe
Hmm.
always was depending on your reading of it, but also just like this urge to still be doing things and like pleasing people, and he still wants to be this person in the world that people admire,
Yeah.
you know.
Hmm.
And you can see where a character like this would be like so drawn to like the on the waterfront type of monologue as like a mantra almost.
Hmm.
So
Yeah, like the last couple, like the flash forwards at the end, they're like pathetically funny in a way because it's just
yeah.
like, oh my God, like it's a comedy routine. What are you doing? And then like when he tries to sell the jewels off his belt,
Oh
I'm
god.
like, dude, like those little jewels like aren't worth anything.
And then the other, he's
Yeah,
just like, you could have just sold the belt.
yeah, just sell the whole thing.
Yeah, could have gotten a lot more money. Yeah, so like by the end, I'm really left with this feeling of like, he did kind of want to have this reconciliation with his brother when he's in that parking lot scene where he's trying to like awkwardly hug him, and Joey's just like not really having it, but kind of gives in anyway. And then by the end, I think Jake kind of doesn't blame his brother for feeling like he wants to put some distance between them. But at the same time, it's like he still is just himself and he's always going to be himself, kind of this really toxic, miserable, violent man who craves respect and isolates everyone around him. And those themes are really compelling, but also as a protagonist is just like, I really have zero sympathy for you.
Yeah, because I feel like you want to see that he's learned something, and you don't really get that sense in any way. Even though he tries to hug Joe Pesci, but it's like I think you want to see them talk it out, and even if he doesn't forgive him, you just kind of want to see something more than that. I do think like the scene when he like hung up when Joe Pesci like answered the phone and he thought he was Salvi and he just starts yelling at him and
Yeah.
Jake just hangs up. I thought that was actually very moving.
Mm.
Because he just kind of gave up on that and he's like, I can't deal with this right now. I thought that was like a great like subtle moment in a movie of very loud moments.
Yes,
It's
you
just
do
like
kind of, yeah.
yeah, like he just doesn't have the wherewithal like within himself to deal with that right now. And then they go years without talking to each other.
Right. So yeah, it's overall, I have to say, it's a very unrelenting film. It's difficult to watch, as we've kind of outlined here, but I do think that it is very much worth watching at least once. Probably you're only going to want to watch it once
It's
if you
definitely
haven't
worth
already.
watching
Yeah,
for the filmmaking. That there's
yeah,
just so much. I mean,
exactly.
watching it the second time, I noticed the sound design more.
Oh
Just
yeah.
yeah, like in all the fight scenes, just everything about it is it's beautiful. Like
Hmm.
just like watch it once for like the story, and then watch it a second time. Just pay attention to the craft.
There you go.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, because there's so many odd sound choices made between like a woman screaming and then animal noises and even the music choices.
Yeah.
Some of them classic. You know.
And then it just like shifts into silence, and
Right.
then
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. And that is a very deserving sound nomination that it received there. And I
Mhm.
think it does go beyond the typical boxing genre film. You know, it's elevated boxing, as they've said about elevated horror. It is a very good psychological story. It's just, for me, the thing that prevents it from being the masterpiece that a lot of people have lavished praise upon it for being is just, I do feel like it does get so redundant after a while that
Mhm.
I'm like, you have already proven your point by hour one.
You know, when I saw Gravity, I was reminded of Raging Bull because she
Hmm.
just does the same thing in Gravity. Like she has to repeat what she did when she just goes finds a spaceship, you know, like she does that twice.
That's true.
And I'm just like, it's kind of like Raging Bull, just like telling the same story over again. And
Right.
yeah.
Yeah. But again, it's from a technical standpoint alone, like the black and white, it's not, I don't think it's, obviously it's not just for, you know, showing off or flashiness. I think it does make it look very timeless and certainly distinguishes it, and also, you know, has those, from a business standpoint, like they can't show that much red blood everywhere that
Yeah,
is present throughout
that's
this
why
film.
he said he wanted to shoot in black and white, right?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
just from like a practical standpoint of
Yeah.
like selling this movie.
But I do love that like all the home videos of like their wedding and stuff is in color.
Mm, right, yes, that
Yeah.
is a good touch.
Mhm.
Yeah. So that's Raging Bull. Let's when we come back, we will get into why Raging Bull did not win the Oscar for Best Picture, because it lost to another kind of a downbeat, sad movie called Ordinary People.
The Bronx Bull, the Raging Bull. Let's hear for the great Jake LaMotta, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm the best. And I can take him more than anybody.
You're dead. You're married. Leave the young girls for me.
There's no way I'm going down. I don't go down for nobody.
What is it with him? Why does he have to make it so hard on himself?
If you beat Trigger Ray, you'll get a shot at the title. You feel that way?
There's no one else around who wants to fight me. They're all afraid.
I've done a lot of bad things, Joey. Maybe it's coming back to me.
And we're back. So now we'll be talking about why Raging Bull lost Best Picture to Ordinary People. Raging Bull was nominated for 8 Academy Awards, including Best Picture, Best Director for Martin Scorsese, Best Actor for Robert De Niro, Best Supporting Actor for Joe Pesci, Best Supporting Actress for Kathy Moriarty, Best Cinematography, Best Film Editing, and Best Sound. And it won 2 of those for Robert De Niro and Film Editing. So before the Oscars, Raging Bull didn't win anything major as far as the televised kinds of awards or Guild Awards, but it did win with the Los Angeles Film Critics and Boston as well. And De Niro kind of swept most of the critics' prizes for actor, as did Joe Pesci, for that matter. While Ordinary People won the Golden Globe for drama and the DGA and the WGA for adapted. So really, when you look at this, it's one of these things where people are like, oh, how did Ordinary People beat Raging Bull? That's crazy. When it's like, if you look at the race in the context of things, it's like, well, Ordinary People is always going to win. So let's talk about it.
I've read like articles from back then just covering the race, and it's like everyone expected Ordinary People to win going into that night. So it's not the shocker as a lot of people might think it is. Like they might just be, chagrined that Raging Bull lost, but it was not a surprise that it lost, I don't think.
Right.
Yeah.
It's one of these things where people look back and they're like, oh, how did that happen? Mm-hmm. But I think that's more of like saying in a vacuum, how did it happen between these two movies outside the context of anything that was actually happening? Mm-hmm. So yeah, Ordinary People is, like I said, another bit of a bleaker, sadder kind of film, sort of like Raging Bull, and also sort of like The Elephant Man, and also sort of like Tess. So the Academy was really in a dark place in 1980.
I really enjoy Ordinary People, and it's actually, unlike Raging Bull, I've seen it multiple times. And
me too.
Yeah, like I rewatched it after Manchester by the Sea came out, just because they were both just really well done meditations on grief. And then like a couple months later, Mary Tyler Moore died, and I rewatched it again.
God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, she's amazing in the movie. I think it's like such just a well done movie. Like, is it the best movie ever? No, but every component about it is so good. And it's not flashy like Raging Bull. And I think that's why people regard Raging Bull as, a quote unquote better movie. And I do think Raging Bull is the like more well-made movie, but Ordinary People is not a bad movie by any means. And whereas Raging Bull's story is its weakest point, I think the story in Ordinary People is the strongest. Like it's also a character piece, but it centers around these 3 characters, and each of them has their own story, and you really understand each of their points of views. And like even like Mary Tyler Moore's character, like for a lack of a better word, she comes off as a bitch, but she's just a very brittle person, and she's haunted by the death of her favorite child. You might want to say like parents have favorite children, but she did, and they all know it, and they're all processing their grief in completely different ways. And you do at the end kind of feel for her, even though she comes off as the quote unquote villain of the movie, but she's not. Like there's no bad guy in the movie, but she's just the one that comes off that way. But and yeah, like the ending is downbeat as well, but I also think there's a hopefulness to it, because it's just, sometimes like with grief, like there is no happy ending, and it like things happen, like families fall apart like this in this case. She's going back to Houston, and I think that's just a way of saying like, they're not all going to kiss and make up, and she's just not going to become like buddy with Conrad, but it's just, this is part of the process of moving forward. So I think it's sad, but it's uplifting in that way.
Yes, I think what it really is very cathartic. Yeah. And I don't know if this is a hot take. Probably not, because I think Ordinary People is getting more appreciated as time has gone on, at least from what I've seen on film Twitter, at least. But I think Ordinary People is a masterpiece. I think emotionally speaking, it is just as powerful as it must have been back then. I mean,
It makes you feel
it,
something, and that's
yeah,
what you want from movies.
yeah,
You
it
know,
really
what
makes
you
you
want.
feel.
Yeah.
Yeah. I had just watched it again for like fourth time, I think, this week. And it's one of these movies where it's like, why would you watch this film over and over?
Love sad
Like,
movies.
yeah,
It's like, and yeah, like it's sad, but I don't feel depressed after watching it.
right, exactly.
Yeah.
Even though I have to admit, even watching it for this time, this fourth time, I guess, I still cried at the end, I have to say.
Well, as we know, I don't cry that much at movies, but
Yes,
yeah.
as we've established.
But
But yeah, Mary Tyler Moore in that film is like, for me, one of the best actresses performance ever in a film.
and it was such I hate like phrasing in this way, but it's such a brave role for her because she was just
Yeah,
so known as this perky like actress, TV actress, and back then there was a stigma with TV actresses as well. So yeah, it was just such a tremendous performance from her. And I don't begrudge Sissy Spacek her win, but I wish there was a way both of them could have won.
yeah. Which is what happened at the Golden Globes. Which
Yeah,
is why sometimes I appreciate the Golden Globes, so they can, like, you
have
know,
two categories.
right, yeah. Because yeah, it is just, I think you do feel what she is going through despite her being so stoic and cold through most of this film.
Yeah,
Um
I really love that, the end when Donald Sutherland, tells her like he doesn't know if he can love her anymore. And I think in a lesser movie, you would just have like, like a blow up or just like a conversation between the two of them. Like they just hash it out. And even if she ends up leaving at the end, but she just goes back upstairs and that's when she has her release when she's packing.
right,
I thought that was so well done.
right. And also in a lesser movie, you maybe wouldn't have even gotten that release that she has at
Oh
the
yeah,
end there.
in the lesser
It-
movie, they would all just make up and live happily ever after.
Right. Or if they just wanted to make her like this horrendous, awful one note villain, they wouldn't have even had that at all. They just would have had her
Yeah,
out the door.
yeah.
So, yeah, I think it's, and Donald Sutherland's performance, non nominated performance, I might add,
The
is
cruelty.
just completely heartbreaking. And he is probably the one I felt most sympathy for, oddly enough, just because I could just feel him wanting to hold his family together so much. And he just knows that it's just not going to get back to that place anymore.
Yeah. And what I love about it too is like none of them are wrong. Like they're all right and wrong.
Hmm.
It's just they're all going through such different emotions and they're just trying to work through it and it's just difficult. Like the argument of them on the golf course.
Mm,
Like it's they each bring up things and just suggest things that the other person doesn't say, but I don't think either of them are wrong in that case. And it's just really great writing for both.
exactly. You totally understand both perspectives, which is the best type of writing. It's just so confident in its characters, you know.
Yeah.
Oof. And also we do have to talk about obviously Timothy Hutton, who
Category fraud, but
who is a major case of category fraud because he is the lead character by all intents and purposes. But yeah, so he wins in supporting
he's
actor.
amazing. I don't think he would have beaten De Niro if he had
No.
won in lead. Yeah, no one was beating De Niro, but he. So I'm glad in that sense that he won an Oscar for it. But he is undisputably the lead in the movie.
Yeah.
So,
And that cathartic breakthrough that he has with the therapist near the end is another really beautiful moment.
like all the therapy scenes, because like I feel like in like future movies of therapy, because this is like also when therapy became less taboo, around this time in the real world. And And now, we have so many like therapy scenes in movies, but I really love the ones in this one because the therapist is like Judd Hirsch. Like he's not trying to become his friend.
Yeah, not at all.
Because like I feel like, in like recent history, the most famous therapy movie scenes are, Robin Williams and Good Will Hunting and that one, it is a different movie, but it's also you get so much of the backstory with Robin Williams's character, and it's also like Will is trying to help him like, get through his stuff with his late wife. But here it's just Judd Hirsch is trying to help Timothy Hutton, and he never explicitly states anything. He just talks him through it. And the last scene when he just like comes into his office in the middle of the night, and he like the way he like seamlessly transitions into like role playing Bucky was really great too. I thought like he's I think that's what a good therapist does, and is one of the best portrayals I think on film.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like it's something that a therapist could be like, that is like the ideal way to do this job, which isn't always the case or ever the case really that much with a lot of different jobs that are portrayed in Hollywood. I feel like
Yeah.
But yeah, so we also have to talk about the fact that Robert Redford is making his directorial debut with Ordinary People. He is kind of transitioning from the golden boy type of actor that he was perceived to be for many years at that point into something a lot edgier, a little darker. So I think there was some appreciation for that as well with the Academy.
Yeah, and it's just that also he did such a good job with it as
Yeah.
well. And I mean, I don't know what the expectation was, when it was announced that he was directing this movie, but I thought he did a great job. And again, it's unflashy, but every like composition, every frame is so well done. And I love how like the movie in the beginning, it starts with these like wide shots, and like as it goes along, you get closer and closer to the characters. And then the framing of some the scenes too, like you always had like Mary Tyler Moore kind of like in the distance, like kind of like isolated from the other characters, just to symbolize the relationship.
Yeah, it's really very smartly directed, and it's definitely not flashy in its direction, despite the fact that he does win Best Director here. I feel like, in a modern time, maybe it would be different, where Ordinary People could win Best Picture, and then people would be like, oh, the big technical achievement, Martin Scorsese, Best Director.
If they came out now, it would be a split.
Yeah, for sure. So, but I hate to say it, but I have to admit I'm glad that the Academy went the way it did.
Mm-hmm.
Because just regardless of the amount of technical achievement that Martin Scorsese puts into Raging Bull, you do have to look at the big picture as far as everything, including the story. And I do think that Ordinary People just is everyone firing on all cylinders, every aspect of the film, so naturally, to the point that you don't see the seams, you don't see it being put together. It's just all this well-oiled machine.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think there's so much to be admired in Raging Bull, but the cohesiveness in Ordinary People is nothing to scoff at. Like it's such a well-made picture, and it's like in so many ways it's more powerful than just the brutality of Raging Bull. And I think it's like the definition of, what you would call like a quietly powerful film, because there is no fireworks. Like there's hardly any of those like kind of Oscar baity moments that you might think of. And I mean, like what the loudest scenes are like the golf course, which is just like a minute long, and then like Timothy Hutton saying like, give her the damn camera.
Oh God, yeah. that family picture scene is just
it's
like
so awkward, but
oh God, please just work this out. And you can sense her being so hesitant to even touch her son. And it's just like, oh God.
And then like the bookend at the end when he hugs her, and then he just could not wait for him to let her go. Like,
yeah.
Yeah, it's just so well acted.
It's a masterclass in acting and writing, definitely. So I think that's a pretty good outline of why Ordinary People won, especially because I feel like a lot of people agreed with our takes on the film.
And it's
But
just an easier watch too. Like it's
yeah,
sad, but I think it's that thing when you talk about like Oscar voters, and they sit down and watch a movie, they might have a hard time getting through Raging Bull.
yeah, I could see a lot of the older Academy members being really turned off
Mhm.
by the violence in Raging Bull.
And now we have the hindsight of it's almost 40 years later, and there are just certain things, whether it's art or just people in general, like historically speaking, when you have some distance from it, you just learn to appreciate it more. And I think that's what Raging Bull needed. It needed time. Like
Yeah.
people weren't ready for it in 1980.
They weren't ready for it.
Yeah.
Yes. But it certainly has been very much appreciated in the years since. It was in the National Registry, it's all over the place as far as best films of all time, all of that. But I do just want to note that Ordinary People, I think, deserves to be in that conversation just as much for different reasons, but still it needs to be appreciated more than it is.
It's underrated, and
Yeah.
it has the baggage of being the film that beat Raging Bull.
Yeah, and if it didn't have that baggage, I feel like probably remembered a lot fonder.
Mhm.
But we did get a few questions about Ordinary People from Twitter. This is from Mark Lamb, who talked about Mary Tyler Moore, saying, I think Mary Tyler Moore and Sissy Spacek were neck and neck. Did Mary Tyler Moore's TV background hurt her chances, as there was a strict dichotomy in those days between film and TV, with TV being considered much inferior and Mary Tyler Moore seen as a TV comedy actress stretching?
I think I could have. But again, like Ordinary People was such a juggernaut with the Academy and just the industry as well. You might think like maybe she could just get caught up in the sweep, like some people tend to do when their picture is winning. But yeah, there was definitely more of a stigma back then for TV actresses. But I think it's also Coal Miner's Daughter. Like Sissy Spacek was great as Loretta Lynn, and like all the singing scenes and the performance as a whole. And I think it's a more sympathetic character.
Well, yes.
Yeah. And it's just easier for people to respond to Loretta Lynn versus Beth Jarrett.
Yeah, that is absolutely fair. I think it's a combination of the TV stigma a bit and just the sympathy factor, because that is a very important factor, sadly, especially when it comes to actresses compared to actors, because didn't have a lot of sympathy for Jake LaMotta, but that didn't seem to be a problem.
Like in that same vein, I kind of feel like that's what hurt Donald Sutherland, and that's why he was snubbed, because we expect these like the emotional anchors of movies to be like the woman, and when it's a man, which is what Donald Sutherland was in Ordinary People, I feel like you don't respect that as much. I'm doing air quotes and no one can see this, but it's a little like looked down upon, I think, for that, for him to be like carrying the emotional weight of the story, and then you have Robert De Niro over here packing on 60 pounds and becoming a boxer.
Exactly. So that actually leads into the question we got from Ed Stevens saying, Donald Sutherland not being nominated, what happened there? Simply put.
I think that's, and yeah, I don't know. Like, I think, or maybe people thought like everyone's going to be voting for him.
Yeah, I really don't have a clue, because he was nominated in a lot of places, including Golden Globes. This is the Best Picture winner. It gets 3 acting nominations, including Judd Hirsch. But Donald, I guess you could say he's lead. There could be an argument that is Timothy Hutton lead and then Donald Sutherland supporting.
Yeah, or they could be like co-leads.
Right. But then there's always the problem. But when it comes to lead categories, at least, But
Or maybe there was just like De Niro dominated so much, like he got so many number one votes that the other four, it was just kind of a free for all, and Donald like fell through the cracks.
right. So the other nominees were Robert Duvall for The Great Santini, John Hurt for The Elephant Man, Jack Lemmon for Tribute, and Peter O'Toole in The Stuntman. I mean, a lot of those names are very well respected, and they are people who really play the game well as far as being very entrenched in Hollywood.
Yeah, like Jack Lemmon.
Yeah, for sure. So there's that factor. And, I was reading in Inside Oscar when Donald Sutherland actually made a comment to the Today Show after he was
I
snubbed.
read that too, yeah.
Yeah. And he basically said something to the effect of like, I know that crowd. I knew I wasn't getting nominated.
Yeah. I was like, tell me more, Donald. What do you mean?
Yes, speak on that, actually.
Is it because you're Canadian? Is that what you're saying? No.
Yeah, I don't know. It's very interesting. I wish, like I was saying for the past few weeks, like I wish people these days were this candid about their feelings.
I know, it's just like I'm so honored, and then it's just like we'll see. Like I don't pay attention to that stuff, so
Yeah, like is that really that important? I just do it for the craft. And Donald Sutherland's like, well, I know them. They don't like me. That's
and I
it.
think there's another quote in there when like before the nominations where he was talking about like the possibility of getting one. I forgot what he said, but it was like he was just I think like people were expecting him to get one and he said something, but I don't remember the quote.
Yeah.
I think it's in there though.
Yeah. It's a really, really terrible snub, honestly. It's very unforgivable. It's one of like the top 20 for me of just like, how does this happen? Like, how did this slip through the cracks? Especially when you also consider how well the film did,
Yeah.
So the answer is, I don't know. But I agree that it's basically absurd.
His honorary Oscar finally.
I know.
Yeah. From John Bailey, who was the cinematographer on Ordinary People.
There you have it. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then so Gordon at Mark Wahlberg said, if Timothy Hutton was rightfully nominated in lead rather than supporting, do you think supporting actor would have gone to Joe Pesci or Judd Hirsch? So I guess we're ruling out Jason Robards and Michael O'Keefe just outright.
Well, Jason already had two, so it's fine.
Yes, he's taken care of.
Yeah. I mean, they're both really good. I think maybe Joe, just because 10 years later he won for almost like the same type of performance. But I really love Judd Hirsch in it too. But so I don't know. I think like I could see them giving an acting because Ordinary People won and did so well. I could see them just giving an acting award to Judd Hirsch as well because Timothy Hutton was not winning Best Actor. Yeah,
that would be an interesting scenario to have Ordinary People. The only acting win it gets is Judd Hirsch. Like you've got Donald Sutherland, Mary Tyler Moore, and Timothy Hutton giving career best performances,
and then Judd Hirsch.
And it's like actually Judd Hirsch is the one
for the actors. Yeah,
right.
But yeah, I could see Joe winning too.
Yeah, well, Joe Pesci won a lot of the critics' prizes to begin with, so I feel like
he also, I mean, I don't know how much of like that narrative was around back then, but like he had like given up on acting until this,
Right, there was that whole story.
Yeah.
Yeah, and how he had only been in one big movie, also a Scorsese movie, I think.
Yeah.
Before that, and then they were just like, I liked working with him, and they brought him back, and now he has an Oscar 10 years after this. So that worked out. So yeah, I feel like that would have been like a good narrative that he could have been pumping out, with the voters being like, I almost gave up on acting. Here I am nominated for an Oscar.
Mm-hmm. And that would give Raging Bull 2 acting Oscars.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Without picture or director. So yeah, let's talk about some of the other films in the Best Picture lineup. Have you seen Elephant Man?
I have. The only one I haven't seen is Tess.
Yes. So The Elephant Man is another sad film.
Another black and white film.
And yes, another black and white film. We have 2 black and white films in the Best Picture race out of 5 in 1980.
Maybe that they cancel each other out. It's just 2 black and white films.
It's just 2 black and white. Yeah.
People were so put off by it.
Right. But it's David Lynch, our old pal David Lynch, doing a quote unquote mainstream ish, as much as you can call a David Lynch film mainstream, in this for this film, because it's still very bleak and has those artistic avant-garde elements to it at times, but it's still very much a straightforward story.
Mm-hmm. And John Hurt is so good in it. It's a great performance, and it didn't win any Oscars. It won over 8, but I think it's like most famously remembered for helping instigate the makeup award.
Yes,
it didn't exist, and I think people lobbied for them to give Elephant Man a special Oscar for it, and they refused. And then the next year they started the makeup category.
Right, exactly. So this is, I forgot to mention last week, but that was the first proper makeup category, 1981. And here we have 1980. Before this, I think there are only 2 movies that were even honored for makeup with special achievements before 1981. So I mean, that very much would have deserved that for sure. And I understand.
Retroactively give it to them.
Right, yeah. It's one of these things where it's like the benefit of time or perspective or something would be like, obviously this film deserves best makeup. And so I almost wish the next year they could have acknowledged well, you deserved it. And here you go with your honorary makeup award.
They should name it after it.
Yes. The Elephant Man Memorial Award.
Yeah. Best makeup and hairstyling.
Yes. So The Elephant Man is another one that I find actually very emotionally affecting and moving. How about you?
Yeah, I do too. I feel like if that had won Best Picture, I would have been totally fine with it as well. It's so beautifully shot and the performances are great. And yeah, I feel like if that had won, people would have less issue with it beating Raging Bull as well.
Perhaps, yeah. And especially with it from this auteur, David Lynch, of course. But it's very affecting. The music is really gorgeous in the film. And, especially the ending scene, which I just watched it for the second time, I guess, this week. And just the ending with the Adagio for strings that was later popularized with Platoon a little more. It's just oh my God. You have to, I watched all of these movies this week.
You watched all 5.
Yeah, just almost back to back. I feel like I've been put through the ringer.
This is not a very uplifting slate of movies. So
the only one you could really claim would be Coal Miner's Daughter.
Yeah. Yeah, I also think had Raging Bull not been around, John Hurt could have won Best Actor. And I mean, just the "I'm not an elephant, I'm not an animal" speech at the end. It's yeah.
I mean, from a physical standpoint alone, having to act through all that makeup and convey a complete emotional arc from beginning to end, it moves me, So I do agree that probably if De Niro wasn't there, maybe Timothy Hutton would have just campaigned there.
Yeah. But they don't like young boys, especially in lead. So
that is true.
So yeah. I can't really see a scenario of Timothy winning in lead.
Yeah, much as it would have made sense, Yeah. But Jackson DeStefano asked us, Elephant Man had 8 nominations, but no wins. Do you think it deserved any wins? And if so, which ones? Well, I will just say the makeup that didn't exist.
The makeup award, yes.
For one. But looking over all those nominations, I think I would have given it original score.
What one score?
That was Fame.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, because Fame won song, so
Yeah, that's taken care of.
yeah, they could have given it to Elephant Man.
And also there's not really like a proper like continuing score in Fame. Like a lot of it is just
The music,
music.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's like A Star Is Born now. They don't have
Right. It would be like if A Star Is Born won original score. Like,
Yeah.
oh, okay. Well, it's not like best soundtrack. It's score.
I would be fine with score. I don't know about the other ones.
Yeah. Well, we have John Hurt.
Yeah,
Honestly, I would
but I
probably
don't
just
think he was beating.
no. Yeah.
Yeah.
And director, obviously, with David Lynch. I love him, but probably not for this, to be honest.
Yeah, because I mean, I honestly would have given director to Scorsese, but yeah, I wouldn't have given it to Lynch for
Yeah.
this.
And then film editing, you kind of got to give it to Raging Bull there.
Yeah, no
And
comment.
then adapted screenplay is competing with
Yeah.
Ordinary People.
Yeah, that's Ordinary People.
Yeah. And then original score. I would have done it. Yeah. Because the other nominees were Altered States, The Empire Strikes Back, which is also very noteworthy, and then Tess in Fame.
Yeah, and then
Is there another one?
they did art direction.
Art direction.
Art direction. I haven't seen Tess, so I can't comment on its art direction.
Well, having seen it, I will say that Elephant Man also deserved that.
Okay, so it should have won
Yeah.
two.
I think so. For its design alone, its visual, it's just so gorgeous.
So
So,
why do you think Tess won?
well, it's more colorful. That seems like a really basic answer, but like there's a lot of the lush fields and also the big elaborate houses with the set decoration. I could see a big appeal to that. I mean, it does look very good,
Mm-hmm.
but I just feel like the artistry of the Elephant Man is more noteworthy in that regard.
Yeah, it's so hard for, and not that there have been a ton of black and white films since color started, but it's hard for black and white to compete.
Yeah, exactly.
So
And also, I just have to say, I mean, Tess also wins. I think it wins cinematography. Yeah, and costume design.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so it wins kind of the big flashy
Mm-hmm.
visual awards, but I just feel like it's just like these types of movies, the big poofy dress kinds of movies, are kind of predisposed to get those kinds of things where I feel like other movies that actually have innovative things in that regard are maybe more worthy.
I mean, I think that's just a symptom of the whole Academy getting to vote. Because I feel like some of these, not just this year, but just in the history of the Oscars, a lot of results would be different if it's just a branch.
Oh, yeah. Oh,
So,
yeah. Totally different. So
yeah.
I do wonder like what the totals would have been if you just polled the people in the specific branches. I feel like we would get quite a few differences.
Yeah, it's like everyone obviously can respond to, very ostentatious costumes.
Right.
But do they really understand the craft? No.
Yeah. It's like what Tom O'Neill often says. It's like most costumes.
Yeah. That's why all the period dresses win. So.
Yep, exactly. So I guess I could just speak a little bit about Tess. It's Roman Polanski.
Just 4 years after 3 years after he fled the U.S.
Yep. After pleading guilty to having relations with a 13-year-old girl.
Yeah.
So there's that. Yes, he fled to France. He was a fugitive by all accounts, and makes this movie, kind of gets panned in Europe, but then when it comes over to the States, it's kind of generally well received to the point that it gets directing nomination and all these other things and Best Picture, which I feel like is very controversial because
I wonder what it was like back then, because I mean, obviously, like the climate was so different, but it's literally just like 3 years after he left the U.S.
That's the thing.
Yeah. And also, the movie came out in Europe in '79. Like there was like a year delay before it opened here.
Yeah.
So,
And it's one of these things where, like, we certainly went into this with talking about The Pianist in 2002, where like there's some distance there, but like this is very recent.
mm-hmm.
So it's almost like this weird message that the Academy is sending where it's like separating the art from the artist, supporting this man, you know.
And it also, like, has it ever been confirmed that he dated Natasha Kinski?
There it was heavily rumored.
Yeah, because she
to
was
it.
also like 17.
Yes, exactly. And she is the lead of Tess. She's kind of discovered by Polanski. There are rumors of them dating. You know, it is the like the fact that he makes this movie with this girl who he is rumored to be dating, who is also underage,
Mhm.
just a few years after being, you know, pleading guilty for this horrible crime, is like I'm just kind of fascinated by the confluence of events and how this managed to even happen. But I
Yeah,
guess
I
again,
mean,
the climate was different. But was it that like willing to forgive? You know?
I don't know. I'd be like fascinated to like, I mean, I've never like dove deeply into like that year or like that movie and just how they managed to snag all these nominations. But yeah, I think the time and the climate has a lot to do with it, and it's just
Yeah,
kind of like, oh, it's been a couple years, and he made a good movie, and let's just respect the art.
yeah,
Um, and like this would not fly today. So
no. And I should mention this is an adaptation, a literary adaptation of Tess of the D'Urbervilles, rather famous novel. And
because
so there's
Sharon gave him the book, right? Sharon Tate gave him the book to
right,
adapt. Yeah.
yes, and then he dedicates it in the film to Sharon. So, I mean, is there some sort of sympathy for that? Possibly, I don't know. But yeah, it's just this very strict literary adaptation of the book. Very little about it is very Polanski-esque compared to what we've known him for. So maybe there was some appreciation that he was able to just adapt it thoroughly and in a different kind of style. I think it's very long. It's almost 3 hours. It really it's one of these things where it's kind of like what we were talking about with Raging Bull, where it's like they've made this point kind of over and over, and it's so drawn out that it's
Mhm.
just like, give me something more, you know? So, yeah, it's just one of these movies where it's about this woman who just has all of these miserable experiences that snowball after a chance conversation, and her whole life is affected. And it has a very bleak ending. I mean, it's solid. It's probably definitely near the bottom, maybe at the bottom even of this list for me as far as Best Picture. But I know a lot of people who really respect the film, so
Mhm.
I'm not sure how I feel about it. I feel like I have to marinate on it a little bit because it's very heavy.
Mhm.
But anyway, let's talk Coal Miner's Daughter.
Which is totally upbeat.
Yeah, in comparison, it's like a romp at the movies. Yeah.
Yeah, I like Coal Miner's Daughter, and I think it's just very by the book biopic. Of the ones I've seen, it's the simplest movie. You know,
Yeah.
but Sissy is great, and yeah, it's just one of those movies like I enjoy. Like I have no issues with it being a Best Picture nominee. And like it's also like you never expect it to win Best Picture either.
Right. But at the same time, I could also see like the all of these bleak movies kind of splitting the vote almost and being like, this one made us feel good. And
Let's
it
give it to Loretta Lynn.
right. And it does win the Golden Globe for musical or comedy. This is one of these movies where it's like, okay, it's about musicians and they perform in the film, but is it really a musical?
It's just like A Star Is Born. It's just, yeah. I mean, it's just, the diegetic music aspect of it all. And I mean, I have, I mean, I guess they submitted in comedy or musical. I don't know what happened back then, but if it had been in drama, I would have no issue with it. And also the category is called comedy or musical, but it's a drama with music in it.
Right. That's really where I kind of draw the line, honestly, is like It's not really people breaking into song. It's not one of these things even where
that's what a classic musical is.
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't even think it's really necessarily like the music drives the plot forward too much. I mean, it's very her music is autobiographical, including the titular song itself, but
Yeah, it's all part of the narrative, and it's like if Loretta Lynn were an actor and you just saw her performing on stage, like it would be under drama.
yeah.
You know? It's like you don't see her singing at all. But yeah, so I think still back then they were just putting whatever had music in it under comedy or musical, and I don't know like how they submitted themselves for the Globes or if they vetoed it or anything.
Right. But certainly an interesting parallel that we can obviously draw with A Star Is Born this year. Lots of interesting parallels with this year with between
Yeah,
Paul Schrader.
and Bradley Cooper did Elephant Man on Broadway, like his
Oh my God, I forgot about that. Yes, that
It all
happened.
comes back to A Star Is Born. So
Yeah, truly, it truly does. But yes, the Coal Miner's Daughter is pretty much like a template for musical biopics. That I mean, I don't know that there were even too many that people could be like, oh, that's just a standard musical biopic. This is 1980. A lot of these types of genre films came out in response to that, not in response, but in the wake of Coal Miner's Daughter. Watching it in 2018, you would just be like, well, this is just another standard linear musical biopic. She has her ups and downs, but at the same time,
it's definitely like one of the first, I think.
Yeah.
Especially when you think back from like the last like 20 years, there have been so many.
Yeah, to the point that it was parodied in Walk Hard.
And I think it was like notable that like Loretta Lynn wanted her sissy to play her, like she was part of it from the beginning. So she really shepherded it to get it on the screen too.
Yeah. And it's actually like, I guess to draw it back to 2018 again, a little bit for me, the same issues with Bohemian Rhapsody as far as like the person themselves is so closely associated with the film that you're not necessarily seeing the negative side too much of
right. Yeah, because all the Queen members were part of the production.
Right.
Yeah.
And they all kind of came off looking fine in the film. And
a lot of to do drugs. What are you doing, Freddie?
Yes, we have to go home to our kids and wife. Yeah. It's one of these things where it's like, is this the full story of Loretta Lynn, or is it sanitized, a little bit?
It's the Loretta Lynn approved version.
Yes, the Loretta Lynn stamp of approval. I would like to see the unauthorized Loretta Lynn story. Put it on Lifetime.
But yeah, it's like Bohemian. It just goes through like the beats of what you expect of nowadays a musical biopic. It's like this is them when they wrote and performed the song, and then it just moves on,
Yeah, and then they have their first big hit, and then they have like the personal drama that comes with fame. Then they have like a bit of an emotional breakdown on stage. It's like, this is pretty much beat for beat, but
and then they have their Live Aid concert. Oh wait, she never did that.
Well, yeah. But the Grand Ole Opry is like the equivalent of that.
It's the country version.
Right. Yes. But so I just wanted to I don't think we really got, well, actually, going back to the Mark Lamb question, talking about Sissy Spacek, it's a great performance. She does sing everything, which is at least different than Bohemian Rhapsody, and that Rami Malek is just like lip syncing. So Sissy Spacek sings everything, and they even make note of it in the credits, just so you're like,
she's not lip syncing,
right?
Like my Fair Lady.
Right. All sung music by Sissy Spacek and Beverly D'Angelo. So, and by the way, Beverly D'Angelo is one of my favorite sort of 80s actresses from like the Vacation series and all their comedies that she did.
I know. I want her to like do things.
I would love that.
I know. She's just stopped doing like, or like at least like big notable things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've just been pushing for her to do a big thing with Amy Poehler because
Oh,
they look very similar.
yeah. I mean, what was the last thing she was in Vacation, right? Was that the last
Yeah,
good?
pretty much, or at least the last notable thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Beverly, come back to us.
Beverly, we need you. But she's very good as Patsy Cline. Does not get a nomination. I think she gets Golden Globe nominated, but she is very good. She sings. I don't know why she's not here, you know?
Hmm.
But yeah, so I think that's the only win for Coal Miner's Daughter is just Sissy there. Yeah.
Yeah, it was
Like,
just another, like both lead categories, like it was the same people dominating. And I really, just from what I've read, it just never felt like Mary had a chance.
right, exactly.
So,
Like she didn't even win critics awards, which you
yeah,
thought she would.
yeah.
Like it was just Sissy all the way. New York, LA, everyone.
And she's like
Interesting.
one of the few to like sweep like the big critics prizes too, like all of them.
Yeah.
Um,
Which again, you wouldn't necessarily think it would be a type of performance that would do that, but kudos to her. So interesting best picture lineup. As I said, very bleak, but I at least like all of these movies, which is it's a bonus, you know? It's like
mhm.
we don't always get that in the 80s. So this is the last 80s year that I'm talking about. So
Yeah.
it's a
Well,
good
it started the 80s. You went in first, so
right. Yes, exactly. Time is relative. I'm ending on a good note, despite the fact that this is what started the 80s. There you go. Let's get into our Should Have Been a Contender segment where we talk about other films nominated for Oscars in 1980 or any old movie that came out in 1980. So, Joyce, what do you got for me?
I think my favorite films of 1980 are Airplane and 9 to 5,
Correct.
which I can watch whenever it's on TV, both of them. So
Yes. I literally saw that Airplane was on like AMC or something this week, and I'm like, oh, that's actually from 1980. I'll just sit down and watch it again. Like, this is
it
convenient.
yeah, it holds up. Like it's just so good. And it just like if I'm just feeling down, like I could just sometimes I just like watch YouTube clips.
Yeah, exactly. And this is one of these movies where it's like a joke every
Oh yeah, I say like
5 seconds.
whenever I respond like in a text or something with Shirley, I write Shirley the name.
That's great.
Yeah.
It's iconic. It's really great. You know, Leslie Nielsen is just
Mhm.
so fantastic in that movie. Just very clever, and I think it would have been a great little, inspired kind of screenplay nomination.
I feel like it probably could have gone into screenplay now, but
Yeah,
I just don't think there was just much kind of. I think I got a WGA nomination, but I think like with the Academy back then, it just
never would have
not.
happened.
Yeah, it's not the type of stuff they would go for.
Yeah, definitely not.
Mhm.
But huge hit, very influential, I would say, even. But actually, I just wanted to talk a lot about 9 to 5,
I love
which
95 so much.
is
When the three of them like presented at the Emmys last year, I almost died.
it's such a classic film, and all three of them are so well served in the movie. They
Mhm.
each have their own great moments to them, and it's very progressive for its time. This is 1980. I mean, we are getting like the a feminist movement
I
going.
know it's relevant today.
Very
So
relevant today.
yeah,
Still sadly relevant today,
I know,
actually.
unfortunately.
And it's 38 years old, you know?
Yeah, I love it. And then like the song itself, it's so catchy, which I think always helps when you just have the theme song attached to a movie like that. And I I know there's always been talk of like a sequel, but I don't want one. Like I'm fine with the original and I don't need more. And I feel that way about a lot of my favorite films. Like I don't want you to ruin a good thing.
Yes. We don't need Mean Girls 2, even though they did make a Mean Girls 2. But it was just like the terrible off-brand thing.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
I think they're working on one because they've talked about it more concretely this year. So
I know. Yeah. Is it starring them again?
Yeah, because I think like Jane or Dolly like did interviews like talking about it. So
Wow.
I think after they presented at the Emmys, it kind of the conversations kind of sped up.
That makes
So,
sense. Yeah.
but yeah, I just like things to be like untouched. So it's perfect the way it is. I don't need more.
Yeah. And it was perfect for that time too.
Mm.
I would have loved to see that song win Best Original Song
Oh
because
yeah,
I think Fame is good. Fame from Fame
they're
is
both they're both
good.
iconic. It's
Yeah.
hard.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
love them both. It's actually a good category. Also has Out Here on My Own from
Yeah.
Fame, which is very good.
The 80s had really good song nominees and winners.
Yeah. Uh, yeah, that would have been a tough call for me, but I feel like 9 to 5 has just endured for me so much that I would have gone with that.
I know, and Dolly Parton would be an Oscar winner.
I know she keeps losing. Ugh.
She has another chance this year.
I know she girl in the movies from Dumplin'.
I know, but Gaga's gonna win,
Yes,
unfortunately, for her. So,
yes. We actually got a question about 9 to 5, actually, from Andrew Carden, our colleague. He said, "How many of the 9 to 5 leading ladies would you nominate? And furthermore, who would you boot from Best Actress to make room for them?"
oh my God. Well, okay, so do you think either of them would, or any of them would try to commit category fraud? I feel like it's like the favorite situation.
I mean, I think they're all clearly lead.
Yeah. Oh, so they all.
I really do. Like,
They are. Oh God.
maybe, no, I don't know. I was gonna say Jane Fonda could have gone supporting because I feel like the other two have bigger moments, kind
Right.
of. But maybe Dolly Parton would have gone supporting because she's not as much as the
And it's like,
established actor.
yeah, it's a musician acting.
Right. Right.
Yeah. Who would I kick out? I don't know. Do I want all three of them in?
I don't know. He's just asking which ones you would nominate. Would you just like dominate the category with 9 to 5 women?
Maybe. I mean, okay, so Ellen Burstyn, Goldie Hawn, and because I would still nominate Mary and Sissy, I
For
think.
sure. I would still nominate Goldie Hawn.
Yeah, Private Benjamin, man. I don't know.
I don't think Private Benjamin is a great movie, but I think she is
She's
very
great.
good in it.
Yeah.
And there's a good story behind that too, because she like produced it and because she was like tired of the role she was getting. So she was kind of she was like compared to the current day, like a Reese Witherspoon type of,
Yeah.
Nicole Kidman going out and making the role. So,
So I guess like realistically, if like two of them got in, it would be Jane and Lily.
yeah,
Because I don't know if they would nominate Dolly for acting.
right.
And it's it's not like her movie. She's not like the sole lead or anything.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe she could have been in supporting if they just wanted to split the three of them up.
Right. That would have made sense.
Yeah, like it would be really hard to get three into lead.
Yes. But we should just note that the Golden Globes nominated one of them, and that was Dolly Parton in lead. So that just complicates everything.
She got like all the nominations for it, right?
I think so.
Because it was like song, and then
right.
Because I don't think it got nominated for picture, did it?
No.
I think it was the only representative from the movie.
Yeah, it's just the Dolly Parton movie. Of the three, I don't think I would have nominated Jane Fonda, even though she's very good. I personally would have nominated Lily Tomlin.
Yeah, I guess like also like because Jane already has two, it'll be like Jane, you could sit this one out.
Yeah, like take one for the team here. Yeah, it's a great film. So iconic. It's so fun. And just like the little postscript at the end, even.
Yeah.
It's just so great. Talking about how Dora Lee went on to become a country and Western music star.
Oh, it's so good.
And the Dabney Coleman character went to South America and like got kidnapped and was never seen again.
What is Dabney Coleman up to these days?
I don't know. I remember Dolly Parton shouting him out on stage. being like, Dabney Coleman, I hope you're doing well, or something like that.
When it got like really awkward when they were like kind of veering into Trump territory, and then she tried to like steer it back with that.
Yeah, I know.
I mean, I loved him in You've Got Mail.
Yeah.
That was 20 years ago. What is he up to now?
I'm just looking. He was on Ray Donovan.
Oh, 2016. Okay.
Yeah.
That was 2 years ago.
Yeah. I don't know. He's 86 years old, still kicking. So, let's see if there's any other movies. Well, The Empire Strikes Back. Obviously a very notable film from this year. #1 at the box office, of course. It's a movie that a lot of people consider the best Star Wars movie.
I'm not a Star Wars person, which I know was blasphemous, so I'm like, okay. It didn't offend me that it was not nominated.
I mean, I wouldn't even say that it is Best Picture material, even though it's still great and iconic and delivered quite a hell of an ending. I mean, maybe if like an expanded lineup of like 9, I would say sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it does get sound, so there's that. Yeah, it's very good. Obviously, it's well regarded, and I still kind of prefer the first film, 77. I just think it's kind of better overall, more engaging all the way through.
I just also think it's harder for sequels.
Yes.
That, like, Lord of the Rings notwithstanding, it's just harder for sequels to, if the first one made the cut, for the subsequent ones to make the cut.
Right, exactly. So if you're not The Godfather or Lord of the Rings, it's quite difficult.
Yeah, and like in Lord of the Rings, that was like such a special case too. It's like, they were just waiting for the third one.
Right. Or Mad Max Fury Road, which is a sequel ish.
Like
but anyway.
Later.
Yes, but still. I just wanted to quickly talk about Fame, which is a kind of a slice of life experimental kind of film. Not really the kind of film that I think people think that Fame is. I think people who haven't seen it might consider it like a big splashy musical because they remember all the music from it. But it's a very grounded and, really tackles a lot of, actual issues of
it's very dark.
kids. Yeah, surprisingly so. Talking about, just being gay and all of these different aspects that it's like a tapestry kind of film that covers all these different things, and there's not really a clear protagonist. It's all just about these kids just in this performing arts school just being who they are.
I think
it's a very authentic film for me.
I think a lot of people also think of the show first before the movie.
Yeah, probably.
Yeah. I haven't seen Fame in a really long time.
Yeah, it's very good. It's on Amazon Prime. Do you have any others that you wanted to take note of here?
What else was there? The Shining.
There is The Shining.
Yes, The Shining.
That is good. Yep.
Yes, very good.
Kubrick.
Wasn't going near the Oscars though.
But it went near the Razzies.
Yeah.
As we know.
Or
Shelley Duvall.
I know. What else was in 1980?
Well, another very popular comedy, Caddyshack.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
1980 had good comedies.
Yeah.
There's Private Benjamin as well. And...
Yes. Which I just want to take note of Private Benjamin because that is a movie that I like for the first half and then it kind of falls apart. I don't know if you've seen it, but it's...
Yeah, I haven't seen it in a while either, but I mean, I mostly love Goldie and Eileen Brennan.
Yes.
In it, so...
Thank you for that reminder because we did get a question about that.
About Eileen Brennan?
Yes, actually.
Oh.
This is from Brandon Stanwyck, who said, "When I think Private Benjamin, I think Eileen Brennan. How on earth did she lose?"
To Mary Steenburgen, who basically won everything.
Yeah, another big critic sweep.
Yeah. We haven't talked about Melvin and Howard, have we?
No, we have not.
I like that movie too. I love Jonathan Demme. Yeah, I think it's a comedic performance, and also back then it's harder. as well. I mean, Melvin Howard is kind of comedic in a way, or at least like her character is.
Right.
But Private Benjamin is a straight up comedy, and I feel like that was just kind of less respected back then.
Yeah. And we should also take note that Eileen Brennan nomination was not exactly like guaranteed.
Right.
She wasn't even nominated really anywhere else too much.
Yeah, she didn't have any precursors, right?
I think probably not. Yeah, not from what I saw. So when you also have Mary Steenburgen literally winning everything, I mean, it's not too much of a surprise that she goes on to win the Oscar. But having said that, Eileen Brennan's performance is really good, very funny, very it is like a classic supporting type of scene stealing performance as the drill sergeant or whatever her rank is. She's very good.
Yeah, but she wasn't. I mean, it was a win to get in.
Yes.
The lineup for
Congrats on the nomination.
Yes.
Welcome to the club.
I mean, there are some of those cases where it's just you got in and you're not winning. So
just
unfortunately, yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Anything else here that you wanted to talk about? Let's see if there's any other notables.
Smokey and the Bandit 2, huh?
Yeah.
Oh, Heaven's Gate. Oh, yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah. We talked about that a little bit with Zach Laws last week.
Oh.
About that fiasco.
Poor Michael Cimino.
Yes. And we should note that it was a very expensive kind of flop disaster and kind of ushered in a different era of Hollywood almost. You know, so it's a very notewortly
because he had free reign to do whatever he wanted. Yeah.
So
and then it made people kind of relitigate his Oscar for The Deer Hunter,
and that kind of sucks. But
I know.
But I definitely would understand that. I think I'm pretty much good with the ones that I really love and wanted to talk about. The Shining, to add some more thoughts onto that, even though Stephen King hates that adaptation, as we all know, I think it is a very haunting and scary film. I think it taps into that great psychological horror and like the horror of being in an unknown sort of place where you don't know the history of it, and it's like I think it taps into very primal fears.
It's again one of those like Raging Bull, one of those movies where when it initially opened there wasn't like rapturous response to it, and then but with the benefit of time, you look back on it and you just realize how much more you like it and how good it is. Yeah.
Like just the blood coming out of the elevator and the two twin girls. There's so many memorable things from this film that are parodied all the time now.
It's one of those few movies where you just show a still from it to someone and they know exactly where it's from.
Here's Johnny, everything. And I looking at the behind the scenes of The Shining always makes me very uncomfortable as far as what the lengths that Stanley Kubrick went to get some of these shots, especially in regard to Shelley Duvall, who I have a lot of sympathy for, and the fact that she gets the Razzie recognition for it just makes me like even more bummed out. Like she went through all this stuff and then to be like considered a worst actress.
It's okay, Shelley. It's they didn't know what they were thinking back then.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's pretty much all I got, unless you have anything else.
I don't think so.
All right.
Yeah.
Well,
Airplane and 9 to 5.
All the way.
Best movies of the year.
Yes. So this is very much a year for at least for us where it's like very, very dark movies, sad, bleak, and also some of the funniest movies of all time.
Yeah.
It's just dichotomy there. So there you go. And when we come back, we'll be delivering our verdict as to whether Ordinary People deserve Best Picture or if Raging Bull should have taken it.
The 5 films nominated as the best of this year. They are Coal Miner's Daughter, a biography of Loretta Lynn and her rise from obscurity to fame. A Bernard Schwartz, Universal Pictures production, Universal, Bernard Schwartz, producer. The Elephant Man, the story of one of history's most unfortunate men. A Brooks Films Limited production, Paramount. Jonathan Sanger, producer. Ordinary People, a film about the lack of communication that nearly destroys a family. A Wildwood Enterprises production, Paramount. Ronald L. Schwari, producer. Raging Bull, the odyssey of a fighter's victories in the ring and his losses in life. A Robert Chartoff, Irvin Winkler production, United Artists. Robert Chartoff and Irwin Winkler, producers. Tess, the classic tale of a young woman's pride and her passionate determination to defend it. A Ren Burrill production, Columbia. Claude Berry, producer. Timothy Burrill, co-producer. And the winner is, this is the time I'm right, Ordinary People.
And we're back. So now we'll be delivering our verdict as to whether Ordinary People or Raging Bull deserve Best Picture. Joyce, what is your verdict?
Between the two of them, I think Ordinary People deserves it. I just think it's a more complete, cohesive film. And I think Raging Bull is a masterpiece in its own right, but more for the craftsmanship of it. I think the story isn't really there to support it. And I think like the flashiness and the inventiveness that Scorsese uses kind of obscures that a little bit. But I just think Ordinary People just stays with you more and resonates with you more. And I don't think it's a perfect movie. I don't think it's the best movie ever, but between those two, I just think it makes you feel more. And I think that's what a lot of people respond to and how they vote. And I just think that that benefited it in the voting process because, again, like we said, I don't think people wanted to watch Raging Bull again. But that's also a great movie. And, in another year, if they weren't against each other, maybe Raging Bull would have won, depending on how people, again, like responded to it at that time. Because, I mean, we like to say like it would have won if the other movie wasn't there, but I don't know, because it has taken so much time for it to garner the respect and the accolades it's gotten now, as this iconic piece of filmmaking. So yeah, but I would go with Ordinary People still.
Yeah, I agree that both are pretty much, if not masterpieces, at least just some of the best films that have ever been made. I don't know what the difference is between those two, but regardless, they both deserve to be acknowledged for what they did to cinema, both emotionally with Ordinary People, with telling just a really emotionally resonant story to make you feel for characters that you might not even have sympathy for on the surface, but you just get to know them and acknowledge them and appreciate their complexities. And Raging Bull, from a technical standpoint, and everything that Martin Scorsese was able to innovate with that film and become this influential figure. So it is really a case of two films, and I do have to go with like the movie that makes me feel. Sorry to peddle another terrible line from a terrible person, but that is just the movie that affected me more ultimately. And I think that is ultimately what film should be for me, just on a base level. The movie that affects me more emotionally and impresses me, even technically, because again, it is one of these movies where you don't see the seams in the filmmaking. So I appreciate it on that level too. So I have to go with Ordinary People.
Yeah, I think in so many ways, just Ordinary People is more brutal than Raging Bull because it does make you feel, and it's kind of like the perfect marriage of a character and actor. It's so well written and well acted, and it everything is just very cohesive, and I just don't really see that cohesiveness in Raging Bull. Like
Right.
There's just a lot of very strong scenes, and usually the fighting scenes, but it's not quite completely there like Ordinary People is.
Right. So it's like Raging Bull has really impressive parts to it, basically, but then Ordinary People just has a more impressive whole. Yeah. Yeah. So opening it up to all the Best Picture nominees, for me personally, I still say Ordinary People is the best of those five, even though I would definitely make a case for The Elephant Man being right up there with the two of them. What about
Yeah, I would say the same, having not seen Tess.
you? Right.
But yeah, again, like that's the one I would rewatch, and I have rewatched multiple times. Like I honestly can't remember the last time I've rewatched Coal Miner's Daughter or Elephant Man. Yeah, I would still give it to Ordinary People.
Yeah. And then opening it up to any old movie from 1980, does your answer change?
Well, yes, because then it should be a tie between Airplane and 9 to 5. We'll have our first ever Best Picture tie.
It's a tie. Yes. Airplane and 9 to 5.
Yes.
Yes, I like it.
Would people still have issue with either of them beating Raging Bull? Yes.
Perhaps. Yes. Well, I'm just going to have to give the same answer that I've given for the past 2 years / the next 2 years, whatever time, where the movie that won Best Picture deserved it completely, regardless of any other films that weren't even nominated. I mean, I would nominate 9 to 5, honestly, for Best Picture, because I think it's fantastic comedy, one of the best ever. But I just have to go with Ordinary People all day, every day.
Mm-hmm. I mean, again, like I feel bad for it because it just has this rap of being the picture that beat Raging Bull, and I think people dismiss it, and they also like look down on an Academy as stodgy, like stuffy, like old white guys, which they are, but
yes,
it's not a bad movie. It's a great movie. Yeah,
it's fantastic.
It's actually like of like all the domestic dramas that have won Best Picture, it's the best one.
Yeah, I agree completely. It is the pinnacle. Yeah. And it's ironic that I do this podcast to talk about the movies that did not necessarily win Best Picture, some of which haven't, had the lasting power that some of the Best Picture winners have. The sense of like, oh, this movie won Best Picture, but also we should talk about this great movie that was the runner-up. Whereas here, I feel like so many people have lauded the runner-up so much, Raging Bull, where Ordinary People is kind of the one that's like, we need to stick up for this.
Right. Because even like growing up, you just hear about how Raging Bull was robbed. And then you just kind of like go into this like expectation. And if, it's like, that's not the only movie like, with that kind of narrative, but it's, then I feel like sometimes just start to believe it because everyone is saying it. And, again, with, in hindsight, it has a better reputation now than it did back then. Because it also wasn't a successful movie at the box office. Like Ordinary People was a box office success. And the Academy also likes to reward successes.
Right.
And
especially at that time.
Yeah, like at that time where, unlike now where there were, box office hits, and I mean, we have some this year, but it's an aberration. But it's like like Ordinary People had better reviews when it came out as well. And it's like sometimes you understand like the brilliance of art right away, and sometimes you need more time. And I think that happened with Raging Bull. But at that time, I think they made the right choice.
I agree.
And even now, like I think I would still vote for Ordinary People now. Like I think I would give director to Scorsese though, but I would still vote for Ordinary People.
Yeah, I think a split would have been probably the best scenario for this particular case.
But they were just so rare back then.
Right, that's the thing. Yeah. It's really not unlike another episode we talked about on this show, Saving Private Ryan and Shakespeare in Love.
I know.
So
I think like that's a little. I mean, I know I picked Saving Private Ryan, but I think it was such a tight race between them, so it was a little bit different.
Yeah.
Whereas this is like, from everything I've read, it was not a surprise that Ordinary People won. Yeah.
But oddly enough, people do kind of conflate, like this idea of like,
and again, Shakespeare in Love is a great movie as well.
Yes. And if it had not won, it probably would have been well regarded and wouldn't have all this baggage.
Mm-hmm.
So very interesting parallels there.
Yeah.
So I want to thank you, Joyce, for coming on for my...
Thanks for having me again for another controversial year.
Yes, you live for the controversy.
This is what I do, so...
Yes, you're a provocateur.
Don't at me, people.
Yes. And this was our last episode about the 1980s. So thanks for helping me just ring in the new decade, basically.
The older decade.
Yes. It's like an arrival sense of time where it's like, what are we even doing? But yes, thank you, Joyce.
It's been great. I love finding someone else who does not feel or feels the same way about Raging Bull as I do.
Yes.
Because they're kind of rare.
Yes, it's true. So tell the people where they can find you on the internet, where they can at you from your opinions.
Don't at me.
Okay.
At Joyce Eng 61. So you can at me. I don't care.
Okay. The block button is right there.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, you can find me on Twitter at Kevin_Jacobson. Feel free to at me.
We can take it. Okay, it's fine.
Yes, I've heard worse. Believe me, it's fine. So the show is at Oscar Runner Up on Twitter. The show is on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, Google Play. Rate, review, subscribe, and I'll leave it up to you listening to decide whether Ordinary People or Raging Bull should have won. I'm actually interested to see what people say because I don't really know. So this will be very fun. And you could do that at filmtrophies.com or my email at filmtrophies@gmail.com. So once again, thank you, Joyce. And I will bid you all adieu.